All right. Well, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to touch briefly on why I think facial expressions are important. Certainly, you can have a person who just stands still, but their face could be telling the whole story. Um, I have a lively face, and I think that I wear my my emotions on my face, and sometimes I call it the RBF, but I just like to say that I'm original, and I like to keep things going. But I think facial expressions are important, especially with students, because if you're going to be conveying the message, you don't want them to be flailing their arms, showing what's happening. You really want them to show it on their face. So this is going to give you a chance to work with your students on how to effectively uh, do facial expressions. Um, we want to avoid a student's face falling flat. I mean, choosing between A, B, or C. Certainly A is usually the one that we get when you're starting to build a character. We're not quite sure what we're wanting to do. B, we're starting to see where there's a little bit of working. Maybe that's with humor, or if you're trying to change your face a little bit. And C describes certainly a different kind of emotion. Um, Looking at all three of those, certainly B and C, I would rather watch a speech that is containing facial expressions with one of those as opposed to A, that could make for a long 10 minutes. Uh, Facial expression exercises, if you would relax your jaw and your tongue inside your mouth. We could be doing these with our students in practices, or we could be doing them on our own, sitting them home for homework, or if you wanted to do them with a group of students when you're doing warm-ups. This will just give them a chance to really open up and have the facial expressions a little bit wider, so that their face isn't as tight, maybe on a Saturday morning. If you relax your jaw, it doesn't look like you have a clenched jaw. Later on in this presentation, I'll be showing you that a clenched jaw will give off an angry impression, and that's not necessarily what you're trying to accomplish if you're just doing a public address. So relaxing your jaw and your tongue inside your mouth is going to give you just a little bit of a calming facial expression. Lift your eyebrows a little like you would when you're having an interesting conversation with someone. That's going to be more natural than all of a sudden a shock and surprise, eyes wide open. But this is going to allow you to see where that medium level is going to be. Taking your surroundings with your eyes, this will help you scan kind of where you're going to be directing most of your facial expressions. It also helps with how much room you have with balancing and spotting and things of that nature. It helps you kind of gain balance of the room. Breathe in through your nose and let your breath escape through your mouth, which will be slightly open due to a relaxed jaw. So if you're having that relaxed jaw, it's going to be easier to have a natural breathing pattern, which is going to make it seem a little bit natural, as opposed to breathing with your mouth, which is going to be hard to do when you're talking. If you're having fun, let that shine in your eyes. Lift the corners of your mouth and smile. Um, Sometimes you are talking and you get really excited and you start smiling, and suddenly the story becomes a little bit livelier, which is nice if you're trying to convey something that really makes you excited, or it makes you happy, or you're glad that it's around, or it's interesting in the topic if it's a public address. Some speech coaches like to choreograph facial expressions like winks and surprise looks into blocking. If that's your preference, go for it. Sometimes, like with a humor, we will block in all of these big, huge facial expressions, which means that usually they sometimes look over the top. But if you trust the process and use them sparingly so that the whole thing isn't those over the top expressions, and it can really make this speech sparkle. And even in a public address, if you add a wink or a surprised face or an angry face or a concerned face, it's going to show you it's going to show more of what you're trying to convey in your speech. When the emotion comes from inside of you, your outward expression will be a natural one. So if you're telling a sad story about your grandma who has cancer, if you're in public address, or if you are even conveying a character who has cancer, um, a more natural facial expression of sadness. Get your whole face involved, not just your mouth. Let the match the energy of the speech. It's really going to complement your speaking. We're going to go through some different techniques for facial expressions. This is just going to give you the rules and regulations for how to do a facial expression. This are really things that I think that are important for facial expressions, not necessarily the golden rule. And you do have to modify it sometimes when you have certain speech students who's doing a certain piece that may require for you to go outside of the box. Being authentic, anything that does not fit into the personality of the role or the character or the speaker, um, this message will unintentionally appear funny. So if you're smiling during a scene where your grandma is dying, that's really going to distract from the message that you're trying to convey. If you are angry that your wife is having a baby, when you're really supposed to be happy, that is all of a sudden like, why is that? And that's completely distracting from the message that you're going to give. I put a picture of a little child because you always see their kids have little over the top expressions when it comes to things like, you bought me a sucker, but that's not what I wanted. So it's almost like one of the, you should be excited, but they're not excited. So it's almost like that's a kiddish type of expression. Smiling is contagious. So I put a picture of several natural smiles, and there's one that's obviously out of place. Many people lose their lively facial expressions under the pressure of speaking, but with a smile that's genuine and is easy to build a bridge to other people. Smiling like a perma smile will seem artificial. So if you're looking at the one that is definitely a perma smile or over the top, doesn't really seem like it is a natural smile, and I probably wouldn't believe that she was actually genuine. Emotions, less is more. The more natural your emotions are, the more realistic they are viewed. Overacting or grimacing removes the illusion of being authentic. So I did several examples of grimace. Obviously, the first one isn't really a facial expression, but he's grimace nevertheless. The second one is Will Ferrell, who is known kind of for overacting, but that face. It's just a little dramatic and over the top. If you're trying to convey that you're sad, I think that you could do it in a little more natural way. And this is the Moira from Schitt's Creek, and she's over actor. If you've not seen that show, you could probably YouTube a couple clips of her to show the example of how you're not supposed to act. She just kind of over the top. Of certainly the actress herself is great, but she does kind of over the top, which is funny for the show, but it would not be funny in a speech setting. Lead with a gaze. I can tell you in public address, when you're talking and you have the audience, and all of a sudden you point away from your body. Everybody looks that way. You can direct the attention of the audience with a gaze. So if you want them to point at, if you want to point, you need to point with your eyes and gaze, and generally gaze where you want them to look. The picture here, it shows the one who has a thumb out and she is pointing towards a window. You naturally want to gaze towards that window because she is pointing in that direction, as opposed to the girl who is looking out, still has a general eye contact with the audience, and she is pointing to a particular place in her hand. For informative, this would be a good place where your boards would be, or the item that you are explaining, and we would be generally interested because you have led us to where we were supposed to look. Eye contact. Good speakers know the importance of facial expressions. Effective presenters engage one person at a time, focusing long enough to complete a natural phrase, or it could be a sentence, and watch it sink in and then move on. Keep looking at all the faces and be attentive, and do not make someone feel uncomfortable or linger too long. if you're having a really deep conversation and you stare at one person for a long time, it makes that person feel uncomfortable, especially if it's a judge. I can take that from experience. If you are in a drama round and somebody is staring at you for a long time, that is going to cause you to become comfortable. And especially if that's a male with a female presenter talking about something that may be uncomfortable topic for him, for instance, rape, girl power, things of that nature. So and not that they're bad topics, but if you don't want to linger too long and make him feel like you're attacking him. Pulling up the corners of your mouth. If you were to look into the mirror and you pull up and kind of make your mouth very tight, and then all of a sudden you just go, that judgmental face that appears, it shows that you are irritated. One side is lifting up of the corners of your mouth and can be interpreted as a sign of seniority or that you know something more than them. And when you're doing this, pairing it with an eyebrow raise will definitely make it seem like you're judging another person. This would be a good one to teach to your discussion speakers. If they are in the middle of a discussion and they are sitting there making a face that's similar to the one I just described, they're going to look like they're judging as opposed to talking or trying to understand what the other person is saying. So we really have to teach them, and you really don't think discussion, they're talking and, having conversations, but you really have to teach them that the nonverbal facial expressions sometimes do give away their true characteristics if they are maybe a natural, progressive person who likes to talk and maybe doesn't want to listen, that they need to make sure that their RBF is not showing through. A tense jaw. I like to call that maybe a little bit of a smolder, an attitude. My teenage daughter gives this to me maybe on Saturday mornings when I asked her to get up and do laundry. Someone who presses their teeth vigorously against each other. They may look angry and aggressive, at the very least cramped. A locked jaw usually signifies nervousness. However, it can also give off the impression of being angry. So this would be another one for discussion. If somebody is nervous and they have their jaw locked, if you're seeing this in a practice round, you would probably want to go back to the facial exercises and kind of show them how to loosen their jaw, breathing through their nose and exhaling through their mouth. And that's going to allow them to loosen their jaw. So the breathing exercises do kind of blend themselves into a couple of these situations. Gasping the nose or grasping the nose or the mouth. Megan Fox here is touching her nose. Would you believe that if she told you your hair looked good today, that would you believe her? And it's one of those things that you unnaturally do. Maybe if you're nervous or have a nervous tick, you touch your nose or you put your face up. Do not touch your nose, your mouth, or your chin during your speech. This is a classic sign of insecurity. Since Pinocchio, this has been considered a sign of lies, and why you should you volunteer your doubt. So if you are doing this, say for instance, you're doing an extemp speech and you are putting your hand to your face, it's almost like you're thinking or grasping at words you're trying to say. And so I think that it's just a very good habit to try to keep your hands down or do a natural gesture. Your face will give you away. So delicate facial expressions, body language either soothes or harms in a delicate situation. So if you are right in the middle of between doing the baseline for your story in a prose and you are about to get to the part where someone's going to die or someone is going to get hurt or something's going to happen to your grandma, certainly body language is going to be, it's going to help. But your facial expression should convey what you're saying seamlessly. A student should be able to convey their story with their facial expressions alone. This is something that I do in a practice technique where I will have my student no gestures sitting down at a desk. I want them to tell me the whole story about what happened in their prose. This just gives me a way for them to say, you know what, you just said it with your face. This is really good facial expressions. And I give them a chance to really capture what they need to say with their face. Adapt your facial expressions to the size of your group. Um, you can see if you are on the phone, you don't have to have this huge eyes, but she does. She almost has the same eyes as if the guy who was on national stage has. So it's almost like they have the same facial expression, but they really, she really should have had, toned it down. If you are in a round with the judge and you, I'm not saying you have to go little. What I'm saying is I think that you need to kind of adjust it so it's not like pow in their face. And there's also a different stigma of when you go to a final round, you have to be a little bit bigger because there are more people in the audience. As your audience grows, your facial expressions should become more profound. It should be bigger. We should be able to see it from anywhere in the room. If the audience member in the last row is not able to see your facial expressions, your expressions will be perceived as natural or lack of interest. So we go back to the A, B, or C facial expressions in the beginning. And I mean, if you are not doing your facial expressions big enough in a room where it's crowded, you may look like you're doing the A facial expression. Students will need to be aware that a difference between the way they perform in speeches and prelims and final rounds. I try to say to my students that in prelims, you certainly want to do your best. Final round is just kind of a step bigger. So your gestures are just a little bit bigger. Your facial expressions are just a little bit wider. That's just to show and really increase what you are selling. So the speech that you have, you really want them to see everything. While adjusting the size of your facial expressions, make sure you do not lose your authenticity, however. So we don't want to go big over the top and lose what the natural gestures that we already had. Sorry, I needed to take a drink. There are 7 universal recognized facial expressions. Surprise, fear, disgust or contempt, anger, happiness, sadness, and this is the neutral face. So before he had done the facial expressions, I was presented my assistant coach did a couple of facial expressions that were the universal facial expressions. This would be a good one if you wanted to print this out and have your student try to match up the surprise, the confused, the sad, and the anger, because where they are currently is not where they match up to be. This will give them a good understanding of what those facial expressions are, and if they clearly comprehend which facial expression goes with which label. Observe your audience. Just as your facial expressions provide insight into your emotions, your audience's facial expressions provide insight. So you can look at their facial expressions and see maybe your speech is going a little bit too slow. Maybe you're being a little too loud. Maybe we have to add a couple of bigger facial expressions to really gain their attention in the beginning. Practice, practice, practice. Facial expressions require practice to develop. Students should be preparing their facial expressions with you, and they should be going line by line. I know that whenever we have a script, we kind of mark one up with what facial expressions or feelings that we should be feeling at that moment. And then we have one for their book, and they kind of adapt it to where we can bring all those facial expressions are over to their script that they use on a tournament basis. This is a picture of a 1953 Disney animator who was making faces in the mirror to get the facial expressions right for Lady and the Tramp. So you can see that he is practicing how realistic it's going to look on the dog, even though it's an animated cartoon. He's still trying to capture what emotions need to be there, which is nice. So what do we do with this information? So now I've told you, kind of what the rules are for facial expressions. How can we utilize that and make it beneficial for our students? So as a coach, you can create emotion flip books. This book will provide students the necessary facial expressions when working on their own in class or after school. So if you're not working with a student at practice, you can do all of these facial expressions, take pictures, and put it into a flip book that they can look at any time, saying, you know what? I really need to know what a confused face looks like, or maybe I'm looking for like a less sad face. What would that look like? Coaches can do that. We can take pictures and even put it on a slide. If you wanted to put it on a slide or a document, where all of your team can utilize it on Google, that would be another way for them to have the information. So that way they don't have to wait for practice to kind of perfect it. You can assign facial expression assignments for your students. That means, okay, I want you to go home and practice angry 10 times in front of a mirror. When you come back, I want to see, an improvement, or I want to see you to up to this point. Or you have 3 lines. I want you to write down all of the emotions for these 3 lines. You can bring a mirror to practice in order for a student to practice the correct facial expressions. We have mirrors inside of our room, so we're able to have them stand there. But if you want them to practice in the hallway, we could bring mirrors in and have them practice in the hallway just to make sure that they have it. You can physically show them how facial expressions can be done. Show them your secrets and let them mimic you. I am a huge coach that says, here, let me show you. You can tell them, I want you to be dramatic here, and then I want you to be happy here. But without you showing them the process of going from one emotion to the other, they may not know what you want or expect from them. So them mimicking you is a really good way of showing. And it also shows that we actually know what we're talking about. You can share reference movies for your students to watch. I always am looking at different facial expressions on movies, and I'm saying, you know what, this is the kind of facial expression you should do. Whether it's What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and you have maybe a special needs child, and you want him to kind of mimic what Leonardo DiCaprio did in that movie. Have him watch a clip of that movie. That gives them a great chance to say, oh, that's what you mean, and show a natural process of how they can get to there. You can walk the student line by line and work through the emotional process. You could celebrate when the student has mastered the correct facial expression. I almost jump over a desk when I see my student get something right, because it's like, yes, that's exactly what I've been waiting for. And so I really try to encourage them, okay, so we got this one, let's go on to the next one. And we, just really kind of celebrate their small victories as well. You can provide a Google Slides for your student to access their visual guidance from home. So like I was talking about that flip book, you have one for the school, but you can also do the Google Slides for them at home so that they can be working on it. You can be honest. Do not let your student continue to do a certain section of their speech at less than full potential. You do not want them to continue to go into a round and think that I'm doing it right when you know that that's not right. So we work, and you can do it in a nice manner, saying, you know what, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. And we're going to try it several different times until we get the correct emotion on our faces. You can point out the potential misunderstood emotions that are causing the wrong facial expressions. So if a girl is smiling during a sad drama, you need to show them what it really looks like, and you need to show them kind of what they're doing wrong. As a student, in order for everybody to be able to see the facial expressions, I wanted to show what we think that showing the whole face, hair pinned back or pulled back, no bangs unless you're going to have them to the side. Eyebrows are natural but visible. I have almost translucent eyebrows, so I always have to put on an eyebrow pencil. And so that might be something that a parent wouldn't teach them. So we may have to show them how to use an eyebrow pencil. Also with lipstick, like I said, the corner of the mouse is going to be really definite for when they're doing facial expressions. So lipstick is going to be necessary for them to not just fade into the background, because lips have a lot of facial expression with it as well. For men, hair slicked back or pulled back. I know their bangs sometimes get a little bit long. Even if they have longer hair, they can pull it back. Chapstick, that allows them to move their lips a little more seamlessly. Foundation, this is 2020. Men are wearing makeup to boost their self-esteem. So I think that maybe if they wanted to, or if they were comfortable enough, put in a little bit of foundation. Sometimes maybe a little acne may make them self-conscious to where they don't want to go big. So maybe foundation might help them boost their confidence. And make sure their eyebrows are brushed. just because they have thick eyebrows, or if they have eyebrows so you can see, I want to make sure that they're brushed and they are groomed, so that way people aren't staring at the eyebrows for the wrong reasons. All right, throwback to some of you people who knew me in high school. Do you see any facial expression no-nos? The bangs are really over my eyebrows and it's not really be able to be seen. I just kind of blah face, eyes closed, blah. Right. So I just want to show you that bangs really do hinder. It took me a long time in high school because I loved my bangs. But when I got to my senior year and I threw them back, it really allowed for people to see my full expression. And I have a full face of emotion. So it's really nice that I learned that pretty late in my high school career. But I know that senior year it really helped me to compete. What face are you going to make? So it's really just throwing it back to your student and saying, you know what, here are the tools. How can I help you succeed? So thank you so much for uh, sitting here and listening to the facial expressions. I just want to open it up to any questions. If not, then I think that we are good. Thank you so much. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. It's kanders at warsawschools.org. Other than that, thank you so much. And I hope these facial expression tips will help your students to become full-faced.